In the world of rebirth, most return as kings or dragons, but our protagonist has returned as a lowly fish in a wet market, destined to be braised or steamed. Fortunately, he has gained a death struggle system that grants infinite growth for every day he survives, though for now, he is stuck in a tank. He tries to share a meal with his tank mates, but being far too small, he is pushed aside and forced to scavenge for scraps. It is a humble beginning, to say the least. A week passes without any customers choosing him, until a streamer named Jack appears, pointing his phone at the tank and making faces for his audience. Jack tells his viewers they are going to do something exciting today, as his picky pet snakehead fish needs some live bait. Naturally, the chat begins to buzz with anticipation. The viewers are eager to see the predator swallow its prey in one gulp, and in that moment, our protagonist is suddenly scooped out of the water. A suffocating sensation immediately washes over him. Before he can even struggle, a large hand clamps down on his gills like a pair of iron pliers, and the world begins to spin. He is tossed into a dry plastic bag without a single drop of water. Suffocation instantly grips his throat, and his gills begin to flap instinctively in a desperate search for oxygen. He inhales only thin, stagnant air as his vision begins to blur. His tail beats feebly against the plastic, making a faint, rustling sound that no one seems to care about. Meanwhile, the live stream is full of laughter, with viewers mocking the fish's pathetic struggle and betting that it won't last more than 3 minutes in the bag. Jack glances at the comments and grins, telling his brothers not to worry. To be honest, he cares far more about the views than the life in his hand. He claims that the entertainment value is what matters most, and since it's just feeder fish for his snakehead, there is no need to be careful. He ties a loose knot at the top of the bag, leaving a tiny gap. That small amount of air feels less like a lifeline and more like a cruel joke. Jack dismisses the fish's suffering, figuring it only needs to stay alive until he gets home. Inside the bag, however, things are reaching a breaking point. Just as his consciousness begins to fade, a system notification explodes in his mind like a clap of thunder, detecting that the host is near death. The death struggle talent is triggered, temporarily activating a massive burst of muscle power. Suddenly, an unprecedented strength surges from his tail. His once dying body undergoes a transformation, and his tail tenses up like a steel chain wound to its absolute limit. With a loud snap, he lunges. Jack freezes in surprise, looking down at the fish that is now thrashing violently on the ground with unexpected ferocity. Amused by the resistance, Jack reaches down to grab him again, but the fish's scales are so sharp they slice several bloody gashes into his rough palm. Jack hisses in pain and instinctively lets go, sending the fish flopping back to the floor. His gills heave painfully, every breath tasting of blood and survival. The live stream erupts in a frenzy of excitement. The viewers can't believe this fish is actually fighting back, with some even suggesting it might be a mutant worth keeping as a pet. Others agree, noting that such a strong will to survive makes for incredible entertainment. Jack, however, stares down at the floor with a look of cold disdain flickering across his face. He tells his brothers not to overreact, asking what kind of trouble a simple carp could possibly cause. It seems your resistance has only piqued his competitive streak. He pulls a much sturdier, larger bag from his pocket. Without even looking, he snatches you up along with several other carp and shoves everyone inside together. This time, he doesn't leave even the slightest gap for air. Let's head home and open the tank. Jack hums a little tune while carrying the plastic bag containing our protagonist. The plastic walls press in tightly, offering no comfort and even less oxygen. It is a grim situation, to say the least. Jack points his camera directly at the bag, marveling at the fact that after 20 minutes without a drop of water, the fish is still somehow clinging to life. The chat scrolls by at lightning speed, with some calling Jack ruthless, while others claim this is just standard procedure. One viewer even bets 50 cents that the fish won't survive the trip. Jack scoffs, swinging the bag carelessly as he walks. He tells them that if it dies, it dies. It was only meant to be fish food anyway. Meanwhile, the world begins to spin again. The lack of oxygen causes his consciousness to fade once more, but the system's notifications remain piercingly clear. It warns that the host is in a near-death state. The death struggle talent is surging, reaching 78, 85, and then 92% activation. Deep down, he knows he absolutely cannot die like this. He desperately pumps his gills as his tail twitches, gathering every last ounce of strength. Jack's apartment is on the 5th floor, and unfortunately for him, the elevator is under repair. Cursing under his breath, Jack begins the long climb up the stairs. By the time he reaches the 3rd floor, his phone rings, and he answers it with a frustrated growl. He starts arguing about tonight's live stream and platform requirements, waving his hands irritably. The plastic bag containing our protagonist slices through the air in a wide arc. With a sharp crack, the bag slams hard against the corner of the stair railing. The plastic ruptures instantly. Jack panics, but his hand only brushes against a slippery, wet body. In front of over 2,000 stunned viewers, we see the fish fly through the air, tracing a shimmering, silvery arc through the dim light of the stairwell. He hits the concrete floor of the 4th floor landing with a dull thud. The sound echoes through the quiet hallway, and for a moment, the chat goes completely silent. Then, the comments explode. Everyone is certain that the fall and the hard concrete have finished him off, telling Jack that he's really messed up this time. It seems like the end of the road, but as we've seen before, our protagonist isn't particularly good at staying down. Using his fins like makeshift limbs, our protagonist drags himself toward the corner, inching toward a small puddle of water left by some unknown passerby. The chat is absolutely losing it. They can't believe their eyes. This isn't just a carp, it's a survivor. Jack realizes this footage is gold and could easily go viral, which, naturally, is all he really cares about. His face pale with a mix of shock and greed, he kneels down to get a close-up. He tells his viewers they are about to witness a miracle, but right at that moment, things take a turn. Without any warning, your tail lashes out with a powerful snap. A spray of bloody water hits Jack's camera lens with pinpoint accuracy, obscuring the view entirely. The livestream erupts in laughter as Jack gets slapped by a fish. Some viewers are convinced this carp is special, perhaps even sentient, and they're officially hooked on the story. Jack wipes his face and roughly grabs you, his frustration mounting. He admits you have decent luck, but insists that in the end, fate has only ever intended for you to be food. He tosses you into a small portable tank with barely an inch of water at the bottom. Despite the viewers pleading for him to keep you as a pet, Jack remains unmoved. He scoffs at the idea, asking what's so special about a common carp. He boasts about his other treasures, expensive predators that are worth far more than a simple feeder fish. He shakes the small tank, watching your dying struggles with a cold sneer. He admits you've done well to survive this long, but then the camera cuts to the living room. A massive floor-to-ceiling aquarium dominates the screen. Inside, a giant arapaima, nearly a meter long, glides through the water with terrifying grace. Its thick scales shimmer like cold steel under the lights, resembling the armor of an ancient general. Jack declares that this, and only this, is the true star of the show. He taps the glass pridefully, promising the audience a look at the ultimate Amazonian predator. The viewers are restless now, urging him to start the feeding already. Bets start flying in the chat, with some wagering the carp won't last 3 minutes. Jack ignores the comments for a moment, busy adjusting his lights and camera angles. He prepares for the big night, leaving you sitting forgotten on the coffee table in that shallow, cramped tank. Your gills move faintly as you continue to gather your strength. You are waiting for the final trial to descend. At exactly 8 o'clock, the livestream title updates to Madman Jack's Night of Tropical Predators. Jack appears on screen wearing sunglasses, standing excitedly in front of that massive tank. He looks like a man who truly enjoys his work, perhaps a bit too much. Inside the tank, the water is kept at a steady 30 degrees Celsius. Over 30 types of tropical fish, including aggressive gar and wolf fish, circle in the warmth. Jack pats the side of the glass and announces that the show is officially beginning. He starts by picking up the bag containing your less fortunate companions. He calls them the appetizers. With a casual flick of his wrist, he brings those half-dead carp toward the top of the massive tank, ready to drop them in. He reminds the audience that these carp came from near-freezing market water, while his tank is a tropical 30 degrees. That temperature shock alone is a death sentence. The shock is immense for them. Before the words even leave Jack's mouth, those carp hit the water and react as if they've been dropped into boiling oil. They struggle frantically. One of the larger ones barely has time to twitch its tail a few times before it flips over, belly up, completely defeated. Then the second follows, and the third. In less than 2 minutes, all 5 carp are floating stiffly in the water. Meanwhile, the massive arapaima glides lazily through the tank. It opens its cavernous mouth, swallowing the water and the fish in one terrifying gulp. And then, it's our protagonist's turn. You are poured directly into this heat, and a searing, burning sensation immediately spreads from every scale to your entire body. Good heavens, why is the water so hot? Your gill covers flare wildly. Every breath feels like swallowing red-hot grains of sand. Your tail thrashes instinctively, your muscles nearly tearing under the extreme temperature shift. You've entered high-temperature waters, currently 30 degrees Celsius. This far exceeds a normal carp's physiological limits. A mechanical warning echoes in your mind. Physiological functions are failing, and life force is draining rapidly. You scream for the system to help in your mind. Through your blurred vision, several massive dark shadows begin to drift toward you. The arapaima, the gar, and the wolf fish. Their scales shimmer with a metallic luster under the lights as they close in. Just as despair sets in, a long, silver-white shape locks onto you. It's a platinum gar, sleek and deadly. It positions itself like a torpedo ready to launch from its tube, aiming straight for your flank. The threat of death snaps you into a state of hyper-awareness. You tell yourself to move, to get out of the way, as you desperately lash your tail. Your body jerks through the water in a frantic maneuver. The gar's sharp teeth graze your tail, and 3 of your scales are instantly torn away. The agonizing pain nearly makes you black out, but you don't dare stop. You swim like a madman toward the shadows of the driftwood at the bottom of the tank. Your vision is clouded and chaotic. Everywhere you look, there are cruising giants. You huddle into a narrow crevice in the wood, your gills heaving in terror. You watch this underwater nightmare unfold, waiting for the end. But right then, the long-awaited voice of the system finally rings out. The burning pain doesn't vanish, but your body begins to adapt with frightening speed. Your gills are actually starting to extract life-saving oxygen from this scalding water. You realize you might actually survive this. However, before you can even catch your breath, the platinum gar that missed its first strike turns back around. It has remembered your scent and is closing in on your hiding spot again, using its sharp snout to poke into the gaps of the driftwood. Its razor-sharp teeth snap open and shut with a sickening click. You press yourself tightly against the wood, praying for it to just go away. Huddled at the bottom, our protagonist doesn't dare twitch a single fin. Suddenly, a dull thud echoes through the glass. It's Jack, tapping the tank with his finger. Meanwhile, the livestream chat has completely exploded. Good heavens, this carp actually has some moves. One viewer writes, he actually dodged that first strike. Others are questioning Jack, asking if this is really just a normal fish, as its reaction speed is simply incredible. They're calling it the strongest feeder fish ever seen. Jack, however, waves his hand dismissively, clearly losing his patience. He tells the audience it's just a lucky carp and asks if they've never seen a fish jump before. To prove his point, he slams his hand against the glass once more, trying to stir the predators into action. The chat continues to mock him, joking that he's failing to handle a simple carp. Jack's temple throbs with irritation as the instant kill he promised fails to materialize. He abruptly grabs 3 plump grass carp and holds them up to the camera. Watch closely, everyone, he snarls. I'll show you what a real feeder fish looks like. As the new fish hit the water, the entire tank erupts into a frenzy. The silver, blade-like platinum gar darts out from the rockwork like a bolt of lightning. It snaps up the fattest grass carp in one bite, sending a cloud of blood into the water, while the other 2 are torn apart by the lurking red-tail catfish and the alligator gar. The viewers are thrilled by the carnage, demanding more. Jack wipes the sweat from his brow, looking quite pleased with himself once again. He taps the glass heavily right near our protagonist, sending vibrations through the water. See that, he boasts. That carp earlier was nothing but pure luck. Leaning close to the camera with a cold smirk, he makes a bold claim. If that carp is still alive by sunrise, he'll do his next stream standing on his head. Inside the tank, we see our protagonist still huddled deep within the shadows of the driftwood. He is trying his best to remain invisible, but the environment is working against him. The system reports he has been in the high-temperature zone for 47 minutes. His tail is damaged, 3 scales are gone, and a massive predator is approaching. His vision locks onto a silver giant nearly a meter long, the platinum gar, which is slowly cruising through the tank on a hunt. Its armor-like scales scrape against the artificial rocks with a grating, metallic sound. To the left, a squad of 5 piranhas glides through the water weeds. Their crimson eyes glow in the dim light. Desperate, he begs the system for something useful, and finally, a survival reward is triggered. The system announces a survival bonus, and a strange sensation begins to pulse through his small frame. His body suddenly stiffens as he feels a surge of raw power forcing its way through his muscles, preparing him for the fight of his life. As our protagonist darts into a crevice, the platinum gar's teeth slam violently against the stone with a dull thud. Now in pain, the predator is utterly enraged. A sudden flash of light pierces the water as the gar lunges from a sharp angle, its blade-like snout aiming straight for our hero's eyes in a desperate moment. He dives sharply, letting those jagged teeth graze the top of his head and slice off a small piece of his dorsal fin. The searing pain turns his vision black, but he knows he cannot stop. Using his momentum, he rolls and swims frantically toward the filter. His body slams hard against the ceramic edge, a painful impact, to be sure, but he finally manages to wedge himself in. He successfully squeezes into the narrow gap behind the filter. Outside, the gar circles irritably before finally giving up, while the livestream chat erupts in disbelief. Viewers are stunned, wondering if the carp intentionally lured the gar into the rocks. Jack's face darkens as the comments mock his fierce predators for failing yet again. His face is a mask of fury now. Rubbing his bloodshot eyes, Jack suddenly grabs a long-handled net and tells his audience that it's time to raise the stakes. The danger is so close, he can see the serrated structures inside the predator's throat. In this dead end, he makes a desperate, mad dash toward the electrical housing at the tank's base. A blinding blue light suddenly explodes, turning the entire aquarium into a shimmering azure cube. The massive arapaima thrashes violently as the current hits its frame. Our hero seizes the chance to bolt toward the surface. Before anyone can react, he uses every ounce of his strength to leap clear out of the water. Jack, who is standing on a stool to get his phone closer to the water for a better shot, sees nothing but a sudden dark shadow rising toward him. The fish leaps with surprising grace, a final act of defiance against its captor. By the time Jack recovers, our protagonist has already retreated to the most hidden corner of the tank. Meanwhile, the viewer count surges past the 1,000 mark once again. Jack's frustrated roar causes the camera to shake violently. He demands everyone follow his channel, betting his reputation that this carp won't survive the night. He dismisses the carp's struggle as a final burst of energy before death and abruptly ends the stream. The screen goes black, leaving the audience in suspense. With the camera off, Jack glares coldly at the tank, his eyes lingering on his prized arapaima. He mutters that a pathetic feeder fish could never truly change its fate. It is now 1:47 a.m. The only light in the tank comes from the faint glow of a street lamp outside. Our hero huddles behind the filter, every single scale aching. It seems these predators never sleep. Watching them cruise the tank, he finds himself actually missing the crowded fish shop. A strange thought, perhaps, but an honest one. At least there, he didn't have to worry about being torn apart. Compared to this watery hell, that cramped shop feels like a distant paradise. He has survived for 7 hours and 23 minutes. His injuries are moderate, with a torn tail and missing scales, and the system issues a grim warning. We see the system alert flashing. 3 alligator gars have entered a hunting state. Their prehistoric, monster-like silhouettes are currently circling the middle depths of the tank. Their dagger-like teeth shimmer in the dim light. To the right, a golden dorado scans every corner with bulbous, glowing eyes, searching for any sign of movement. One has to wonder just how many lethal predators Jack has crammed into this tank. Suddenly, a pitch-black ghost knife fish glides past our hero like a phantom. He instinctively retreats deeper into the shadows, only to bump into something hard and ancient. It is the snapping turtle that usually lies dormant at the bottom. The turtle slowly opens its tiny, bead-like eyes. It seems the signal has been given, as every predator in the aquarium begins to stir simultaneously. The silver arowana strikes first, its long body lashing out like a bolt of silver lightning. Our hero twists his body, but those sharp teeth still graze his gills. The strike tears away a bloody piece of scale, leaving him gasping in pain. He doesn't dare stop, using the momentum to rocket toward the driftwood area. There, he nearly collides with the gaping maw of a tiger shovel-nosed catfish. In this split second of life or death, he makes a desperate, sudden turn. He twists his entire frame with everything he has left. He maneuvers so frantically that he actually lures the predator into the heater. The searing heat causes bubbles to rise from his scorched skin, and the pain is blinding. Taking advantage of the chaos, he dives into a cluster of java fern, only to hear a sickening crunch. The snapping turtle was waiting there all along. The turtle's jaws crush the roots where he was hiding. Will it ever end? He roars internally, turning only to face a massive, bumpy mouth, the ancient beacher. It is now 2:42 a.m. He has lost count of how many times he has escaped death. His left eye is scratched and blurry, making it difficult to see. His dorsal fin is nearly torn in half, and every breath sends a stabbing pain through his abdomen. Fortunately, his death struggle talent has finally activated. The talent grants him 60% pain reduction and a 30% boost to explosive power. Without this, to be perfectly honest, he would be dead already. He has lost track of the close calls, but even with the talent, the agony is real. In a daze, he sees the 30-inch arapaima finally begin to move. The true tyrant of the tank has decided to end this farce personally. Its massive body glides through the water, making the very sand on the bottom tremble. Is this the end? As the giant shadow looms closer, his tail twitches involuntarily. Suddenly, he notices a faint reflection on the glass wall. It is the edge of the lid Jack roughly pried open last night. A tiny gap still remains. The arapaima's mouth opens wide, casting a shadow of certain death. Summoning his final strength, he kicks off a rock at the bottom. With a splash, he miraculously slips through the gap in the arapaima's gill cover and leaps. A trail of blood beads follows him as he uses his remaining strength to rocket toward the surface like a bullet, reaching the gap just before it closes. Half of his body wedges into the lid's opening, while the arapaima slams into the glass in a rage, making the entire tank shake with heavy thuds. He seizes the chance to squeeze completely into the filter pipe, finding an absolute blind spot where he can finally catch his breath in the dark. Watching the predators prowl outside through the narrow slit, he bares his bloody teeth with a silent vow to survive and grow stronger tomorrow. He tells himself that once he is powerful enough, he will truly rule this steel and glass world. The night passes in silence until 10:15 a.m. Jack starts his live stream with messy hair, scoffing at his viewers' questions about how any fish could survive such wounds, until he suddenly stops mid-sentence. On the screen, a battered carp slowly swims into view. He has lost a gill cover, and his tail fin hangs like a tattered rag. Most shocking of all is the deep, bone-deep scar on his head that glints fiercely under the lights. The chat goes silent before exploding with comments. The viewers are stunned that he's still alive, even calling him Scarface, while mocking Jack. Jack's phone nearly slips from his trembling hand as he stares. Jack's mouth twitches in disbelief before he slams his fist on the table, shouting that the fish won't last until noon given the severity of the injuries. He shoves the camera close for a gruesome macro shot of the torn tail and exposed bone. Any ordinary fish would have died 10 times over by now. The livestream audience is divided. While the wounds look fatal, the fish is undeniably alive, leading some to claim it's just a final burst of energy. Jack takes a deep breath and puts on a cynical smirk, telling his brothers not to worry because this is clearly just a death rattle. He heads to the freezer and pulls out a plastic bag, wanting to show everyone what happens to real feeder fish. 5 plump crucian carp are dumped in. The arapaima glides over and swallows one whole, filtering a cloud of crimson blood through its gills as it finishes the meal. The other predators quickly tear into the rest of the feeder fish, turning the water into a red mist that sends the viewers into a frenzy of excitement. Some viewers notice something strange. The predators aren't attacking our hero. He is actually using the cloud of blood as cover to reach the filter. Jack sneers that the fish is just stalling, but before he can finish, the black ghost knife fish lunges from the shadows straight for our hero's belly. In the nick of time, he makes a sharp turn, and the predator's strike only leaves a fresh scratch on his already mangled tail fin. The chat erupts again, praising his godlike movement and asking Jack if his face hurts from being proven wrong yet again. Jack sneers and deliberately ignores the comments, telling his brothers that a broken carp isn't worth talking about while trying to shift the focus back to himself. As he begins introducing his more impressive pets, the camera pointedly avoids our hero, yet everyone in the livestream remains fixated on the little survivor. We see the viewers waiting to see what surprises Scarface might bring next. By 11:47 p.m., the tank is plunged into darkness, and he is huddled away. Tucked behind the filter, every inch of his muscle aches with a rhythmic throb. Today's escape had nearly exhausted his entire supply of physical strength. His internal system monitors his survival time at 48 hours and 12 minutes, but warns that his infection level has climbed to 41%. A warning flashes regarding his rising body temperature. Deep down, he weakly calls out to the system, asking just how much longer he can hold on. The system calculates his probability of surviving until tomorrow at a mere 29%, suggesting he find antibiotic substances immediately. He turns his eyes towards several blue pills resting at the bottom of the tank. Medicine Jack dropped in. Unfortunately, 3 tigerfish are patrolling that area. Their eyes glow with a faint, eerie green light in the dark. He decides to risk it, his damaged scales making a faint scraping sound as he moves. The sound immediately draws the black ghost knife fish. Just as it closes in, a memory from his past life flashes in his mind, and he strikes the heater. The metal vibrates with a sharp thud through the water. The knife fish stops, suddenly wary, while further away, the massive arapaima is also disturbed. Using this brief distraction, he rockets toward the bottom like an arrow. The tigerfish notice him instantly, but just as they turn to strike, the arapaima's massive body sweeps past, knocking the 3 tigerfish aside. He seizes the moment, snapping up 2 of the pills in his mouth. He turns to flee, but the sharp teeth of a predator graze his belly, tearing away a small piece of bloody flesh. To be honest, it was a narrow escape. However, he successfully makes it back to the safety zone. As the antibiotics take effect, his infection progress drops significantly to 19%. He hides behind his cover, quietly recovering his strength. At the stroke of midnight, the system's voice chimes in to announce the daily random reward. He has earned basic regeneration, which increases his wound healing speed by 400% for the next 12 hours, along with a bonus. His Constitution talent points receive a permanent increase. A warm current suddenly washes through him, and he feels his body beginning to transform. With quadruple recovery speed, he can almost feel his wounds closing before his eyes. More importantly, that permanent boost is a game changer. The increase in Constitution makes him feel as though his very foundation has grown stronger. This, he realizes, is the turning point he needed. A new sense of power flows through the murky water. The predators are still tirelessly searching, but now, his eyes hold more than just fear. He waits, his bloody mouth curling slightly. Tomorrow will be better. At 7:05 a.m., Jack pushes the door open with half a sausage in his mouth. He tosses his bag aside, spilling several packs of fish food. The livestream title has been changed to Still Refusing to Die, and the broadcast begins. Morning, everyone. Jack mutters through his food as he sets up his phone. He wants to see how many people have come to watch the broken carp's end. The moment the light sweeps across the tank, Jack freezes. The sausage falls from his mouth as the camera captures something impossible. The little carp, whom everyone had already sentenced to death, is now swimming calmly in the middle of the tank. That scar on his head still looks brutal, but his movements are noticeably steadier and more powerful. The comments section instantly explodes with disbelief at this miraculous recovery. How is he still alive? One viewer asks, while Jack's top hater mocks him. Fans of the carp cult begin sending gifts to celebrate the survivor. Jack's hand trembles as he irritably crushes a fallen cigarette with his foot. He tries to stay calm, but his voice rises an octave in frustration. It's just a scab. He'll be dead within 3 days, mark my words. After his outburst, he tries to shift the camera back to his larger predators. But today, the audience is different. The discussion about our little hero grows, with many viewers demanding more screen time for the Scarface carp. Jack is visibly flustered and pretends not to see the requests. Inside the tank, however, the carp is staring directly at Jack through the glass. He is memorizing Jack's face, the man who treated him like mere fodder. His intelligent eyes observe from the shadows, fueled by a growing inner fire. The torture he endured and the near-death experiences were all because of this man. He thinks to himself that being used for views won't go unpunished. He tells himself to wait. This isn't over yet. Late at night, the live stream ends and the tank returns to darkness as the system updates his status. His survival time has reached 72 hours and 17 minutes. His injuries are moderate and healing slowly, but his hunger is at 67%. The sharp pangs of hunger finally set in. He hasn't had a real meal in nearly 3 days, and his rapid recovery has drained his energy reserves. He is starving, but Jack only feeds live prey to the giants, which he can't hope to compete for. He must find another way to get food. Scanning the tank, he notices 2 red-tailed catfish patrolling near the rockery. They are constantly fighting each other over their territory. Between them lies a single scrap of fish meat left over from last night. A plan begins to form as he slowly beats his tail to move into position. He moves like a falling leaf, drifting silently through the water while making himself look weak enough to die at any moment. The scarred red-tailed catfish is the first to notice, its gills flaring in a wary display. Our little hero deliberately pauses before it, then pretends to panic and suddenly darts toward the other catfish. The injured predator is instantly provoked and charges straight at him. At the very moment of impact, he executes a sharp turn. The predator's snout brushes past his scales and slams heavily into its old rival. In an instant, the 2 catfish are entangled in a chaotic brawl, scales flying amidst a cloud of murky bubbles. He seizes the chance to glide underneath and precisely snatch the scrap of meat. The taste of food spreads through his mouth, though it is barely the size of a fingernail. To him, it is a literal lifeline. We see him watching the 2 fish continue their struggle, his mouth curling in a hint of disdain. This tank is forging him into a true survivor. He hovers within a crevice of the rockery, cautiously observing the tank that has just weathered a storm. The water remains turbid, filled with floating scales and streaks of blood. Several wounded predators have lost their previous arrogance, drifting listlessly in the corners. His gaze pierces through this wreckage, locking onto the darkest corner at the very bottom of the tank. That is the territory of the Arapaima, the undisputed king. A thought explodes in his mind. What if he could convince that giant not to attack? He knows the 3-foot-long beast is the absolute emperor of this tank. Even the piranhas dare not trespass into its domain. Meanwhile, he is the weakest, most humble existence here, dancing on the edge of death every day. To be honest, any random piranha could end his life in a second. But even this tank has its rules. Every boss has its own territory. Although the Arapaima wanders during the day, it always returns to the deep crevice on the far right at night. If only he could slip into its resting area or follow closely behind it during the day, that massive body would become his ultimate shield. After all, who would dare approach it? Hiding beneath the giant, he would be the safest creature in the room. His mind made up, he no longer hesitates and gently flicks his tail. He feels the fresh wounds on his tail. The bleeding has stopped, but the rhythmic throbbing serves as a constant alarm, reminding him of the danger he's in. He must move. The filter and the rockery are no longer safe enough. Using the floating debris as cover, he begins to inch forward, moving with extreme slowness toward the Arapaima's territory. The closer he gets, the more he feels a unique, heavy vibration in the water. It is the dangerous pulse of the Arapaima's breathing. He is almost there. He stops behind a rock, holding his breath as he watches from this angle. We can already see the silhouette of that massive creature, its silver-gray scales shimmering like tempered metal under the dim light. Its enormous body rises and falls slightly with every breath. It is then that he notices a fresh wound on its left gill cover, likely left over from the earlier chaotic brawl. This is his chance. He swims toward the bottom with agonizing slowness, gently picking up a fallen piece of aquatic grass in his mouth. He is imitating a cleaner fish, the kind that earns its keep by picking parasites off larger species. As he inches closer, he can't help but pray fervently that the giant doesn't turn around and swallow him in a moment of irritation. His heart hammers against his ribs as he cautiously approaches the Arapaima's wound. At a distance of only half a meter, he stops and gently releases the grass, letting it drift slowly toward the giant's injury. Suddenly, the Arapaima's eye twitches and its massive frame shudders slightly. Our little friend freezes instantly, not even daring to move his gills. Time seems to solidify, every passing second feeling like an entire century. Finally, the beast resumes its slow, heavy breathing. To be honest, it looks like his gamble might actually pay off, and he feels a surge of relief. Next, he slowly closes the gap, occasionally bringing over scraps of fish food from the bottom. He is being careful to a fault, making sure every movement stays precisely outside the Arapaima's reaction range. Soon, as the moonlight filters through the curtains once more, he is able to swim within 30 centimeters of the giant. The beast remains unresponsive. At this distance, they are essentially standing face to face. The trial enters its final stage. He takes a deep breath, preparing for the last and most critical step. Everything depends on this single moment. In the dead of night, he makes his boldest move yet, drifting toward the flat stone slab beneath the giant's belly. It is a resting spot that seems tailor-made for him. He tells himself to stay calm and steady, even though his scales are practically standing on end. Every muscle in his body is tensed, ready to flee for his life at a moment's notice. He flicks his tail so gently it barely creates a ripple, drifting over like a stray feather. However, the moment his tail fin brushes against the giant's underbelly, the massive creature flares its gills. The movement is like a thunderclap, leaving his mind blank and his body cold with terror. He braces himself, for the end, but surprisingly, the arapaima merely gives a soft flick of its tail to adjust its position, which, as it turns out, actually creates more space for him. He stands frozen in disbelief for several seconds before a wave of pure joy washes over him. With a gentle flick of his tail, he glides forward and carefully settles onto that stone slab. The water currents stirred by the giant's breathing provide him with the most abundant supply of oxygen he's ever felt. He tells himself to stay calm, for caution is his only ally here. None of these Amazonian predators are easy to deal with, and who knows what they are thinking. If the giant wakes up in a bad mood, he could be swallowed as a snack. Fearing this, he quietly creates a bit of distance. As the first rays of morning light hit the tank, the fish, silent all night, regain their vitality. Suddenly, a reckless piranha swims too close. The arapaima erupts, its massive tail swinging like an iron paddle with a sudden, violent strike. That piranha is sent flying, slamming into the bottom of the tank and losing consciousness instantly. Meanwhile, hiding by the giant's side, he remains completely unharmed. He even has the nerve to dart out and snatch a scrap of food the piranha spat out before fainting. It seems this protector was the right choice after all. He watches the arapaima's reaction closely, realizing the giant doesn't seem to mind his humble presence. Actually, it's not that the giant doesn't mind, it's that it hasn't even deigned to look at him. It makes sense, really, considering Marcus usually feeds it live fish several times his size. He is still on the long road to recovery. Without his unique system, any other carp would have perished long ago. Speaking of which, he suddenly remembers he hasn't claimed today's random reward yet. He triggers the draw, and the system chimes. Daily survival reward obtained. Congratulations, he has gained 1 point in agility. Meanwhile, on a social media platform at 2:17 a.m., a user named Aquarium Watch has edited his interactions with Marcus over the past few days into a 3-minute video, set to an explosive, high-energy soundtrack. The title is incredibly eye-catching, 3 Days Without Dying, the miracle of Scarface the Carp. The video starts from when Marcus picked him up at the market, through the bumpy ride, to the moment he was tossed into the predator tank. Every high-stakes moment of his 3-day struggle against these monsters is included. Once posted, the video explodes. In just over 10 hours, the Scarface survival challenge hashtag surpasses 10,000 views. Countless people are drawn in by the title, but once they finish the video, the comments are filled with shock. They wonder what kind of carp could survive 20 minutes in a dry bag and a fall from a height. Surviving that fall was proof enough of his toughness, but as the video continues, the plot becomes even more surreal. Viewers find themselves staring at their screens in disbelief as he is tossed into a tropical tank with a 30-degree temperature difference. Instead of being scalded to death, he is lively and energetic, facing a tank of top-tier predators and somehow surviving through sheer agility and positioning. The other fish purchased alongside him were wiped out in less than 5 minutes. Yet Scarface alone remains very much alive and well. Even after a night where he was beaten so badly he seemed on the verge of death, he regained his vitality by the next morning. At this point, the internet collective simply erupts in cheers. More absurdly, we see him dodge, predict movements, and use the terrain to his advantage. When the video reaches the moment where the host, Marcus, completely loses his cool and tries to poke him with a PVC pipe, the bullet comments instantly flood the screen. Everyone agrees that the host is being a sore loser. But then, as they witness his ghostly, near-impossible movement through the murky water, the audience is left stunned. If this weren't a recorded live stream, with zero traces of editing, who would ever believe it? How could a simple fish be so incredibly sentient? The comments section has completely exploded. They argue it's unscientific, that wound healing speed is simply ridiculous. One user notes that if his $10,000 koi had this talent, he would feed it the finest food every day. 30 degrees, you say? Another jokes. Lower the temperature by 10 degrees and let these tropical fish see who the real genius is. Some claim that a dragon has emerged from the depths and that Scarface is clearly a spiritual being. They've even started calling him Brother Scar. It's surprisingly inspiring. Watching a fish can actually get one's blood pumping. A user named Leo points out that if you look into his eyes, they don't look like a fish's eyes at all. There is a light in them. Between the memes, the analysis, and the hype, the public opinion has reached a boiling point. When they see Marcus's frantic behavior at the end of the video, many feel a chill. Oh no, the host has lost his mind. Will Brother Scar actually be killed? Surely, if the host intervenes personally, a tiny carp has no chance of escaping. Everyone is waiting to see the outcome, fearing the worst for our protagonist. The host is live. Someone notify me, one writes. Others call Marcus a fool for not simply raising this carp, as its fame is worth a fortune. Of course, some disagree, arguing that a common carp couldn't possibly be worth more than a tank of Amazonian monsters or a prestigious arapaima. Despite the debate, countless new viewers begin frantically tagging the video creator, begging for the host's room number. Soon, Marcus's livestream ID is pinned at the top. In an instant, his follower count begins to skyrocket like a rocket ship. Everyone is waiting for him to go live. That afternoon, inside the studio, Marcus paces like a trapped beast. His phone is practically exploding with platform notifications, fan messages, and even former business partners calling to ask what on earth is going on. This sudden surge of attention caught him completely off guard. He had no idea when he'd become so famous, but as he searched for the reason, his irritation quickly overflowed. He ran a hand through his greasy hair, which hadn't been washed in 3 days, feeling like he was losing his mind. The clock on the wall struck 2:55 p.m. There were still a few hours until his stream was unbanned. Frustrated, Marcus kicked a PVC pipe on the floor, which rolled with a loud clatter toward the fish tank. He looked up and immediately saw the carp, the one the internet was now calling Brother Scar, leisurely swimming around his precious arapaima. The fish's posture seemed like a silent mockery directed right at him. Marcus couldn't understand why his beloved prize predator hadn't simply swallowed this intruder in one bite. More than that, he couldn't fathom why a common carp was drawing more attention than his entire tank of monsters. Surely his high-quality arapaima was worth 10,000 of this Brother Scar. Meanwhile, the platform had warned him that another violation would lead to a permanent traffic restriction penalty. His assistant, Leo, poked his head through the door and suggested cautiously that perhaps they shouldn't film the carp today. Even his chat moderators were sending frantic private messages urging him to stay calm. Marcus's knuckles cracked as he clenched his fists, but finally, he just gave a weary wave of his hand. He told Leo to go prepare, claiming he knew what was at stake. Finally, evening arrived, the ban was lifted, and the stream began right on time. Marcus forced a stiff, friendly smile he'd practiced for half an hour. "I'm back, everyone," he announced, his voice an octave higher than usual. It sounded incredibly fake, to be honest, but to his surprise, the heat was even more intense than he'd imagined. Viewers flooded in like a tidal wave. In an instant, the concurrent viewer count soared to 5,000. The bullet comments exploded. "Where's Brother Scar? Stop talking and show us the carp." Others mocked him, noting how pale he looked and accusing him of being secretly furious. "Did you kill Brother Scar?" they demanded. "I'm warning you." Marcus tried his best to ignore the comments. He began a forced introduction of his tank's ecosystem, his voice trembling slightly as he deliberately pointed the camera toward his expensive silver arowana. But the audience wasn't buying it. They didn't want the arowana, they wanted Brother Scar. "Who wants to see those fish? Show us the legend. Is he actually dead? Answer us, host." The veins in Marcus's temples began to throb, and his nails dug deep into his palms. He took a deep breath and, speaking through gritted teeth, forced himself to turn the camera toward the other side of the tank. "Fine, since you all want to see that fish." As the lens slowly panned and finally settled on the depths of the aquarium, the entire chat went silent for a heartbeat and then erupted. There he was, floating peacefully right next to the giant. Beside the massive back muscles of the arapaima, we see two creatures with a staggering difference in size. One as vast as a titan, the other as small as a speck. Together, they formed a strangely harmonious picture that no one could have imagined. When the platform finally forced the stream to shut down, Marcus collapsed onto the floor like a statue that had lost its soul. Our little carp flicked his tail, silently hiding behind the driftwood while watching the man's frantic, ruined state with cold indifference. He was a bit confused about what this human was making a fuss about now, though the way Marcus looked at him felt quite unsettling. For 3 days straight, even though Marcus was the one who bought him, he acted as if the carp was the one causing all the trouble. The fish was full of questions. While he could see the man's movements, he had no hearing. His ear bones could only sense the vibrations of the current and violent noises through the glass and water. He couldn't hear a word being said. It would have been nice to listen in, if only to know what the man was constantly muttering about in case he was plotting something. He wanted to be prepared for any new tricks. After a while, seeing Marcus prepare to leave, the carp flicked his tail to head back to the big arapaima's corner. But just then, his swimming form suddenly froze. A flash of insight flickered through his mind like a bolt of lightning. He had realized something, yet it remained blurry. He cautiously scanned the entire tank. Under the dim light, the surroundings were terrifyingly quiet, save for the low hum of the predators moving through the water. Something was wrong, very wrong. He racked his brain, his gaze sweeping across every single corner of the aquarium to find the source of his unease. Finally, he remembered that streamer had actually logged off today without feeding them. As soon as this realization hit, his expression shifted instantly. He didn't linger a second longer, accelerating toward the big boss's hiding spot. This was bad. It seemed this guy was trying to starve them out. The aquarium glass shimmered coldly under the moonlight. Despite the constant temperature of 30 degrees, the water now sent a bone-chilling shiver through him. He slowly moved his fins to keep himself suspended in the calmest part of the current, trying to conserve as much energy as possible. The burning sensation in his stomach grew stronger by the moment, as if countless tiny teeth were gnawing at his insides. It was nearly the 4th day now. In his mind, he focused as his gills struggled to open and close. A status check appeared, hunger level at 91 out of 100. He was in a state of extreme starvation. His physical strength had plummeted to a mere 39%. He noticed the swimming patterns of the piranhas had become erratic. Their slender bodies darted through the water plants like flashes of silver lightning. They turned sharply from time to time, baring their bone-white teeth. They were hungrier than he was. His tail fin trembled as a dangerous thought emerged. A dark realization began to take shape in his mind. These predators were starving, and things were about to get ugly. Suddenly, a red-tailed catfish streaked right over his head. The resulting current stirred up the silt and mud at the bottom of the tank. This usually lazy giant now had eyes glowing like light bulbs as he scanned his surroundings. Our little carp instantly tensed every muscle. Driven by hunger, these beasts could break their established territorial boundaries at any moment. A system warning flashed. 3 African pike had entered an active state, and it suggested finding cover immediately. To be honest, that seemed like sound advice. But he didn't move. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, carefully observing the restless predators. The silver arowana's scales had lost their usual luster as it paced. It circled the rockery anxiously, while the piranha's swimming patterns grew more chaotic. Even the alligator-snapping turtle poked its head out from its shell. Its tiny, bead-like eyes flickered with a predatory glint. This was perfect. Our carp's tail fin flicked gently as a clever plan began to crystallize in his mind. If Marcus wasn't going to make life easy for him, then he wasn't going to let the man's precious pets have a peaceful time either. He deliberately swam toward the piranhas. Suddenly, he put on a show of extreme weakness, tilting his body and swimming with a sluggish, halting rhythm. This performance immediately caught some attention. 2 of the hungriest piranhas were lured in. They shot toward him like silver bullets, their intent clear and deadly. They lunged with terrifying speed, ready to tear into anything that moved. Scales flew as the water turned a faint red, but it wasn't enough. He nimbly circled behind the combat zone, slapping the water with his tail to create more noise. The commotion instantly drew in the famished silver arowana. Its massive body charged forward like an underwater tank. He carefully calculated the angle. At the very last second, he swerved aside. Unable to stop its momentum, the arowana crashed directly into the fray between the piranhas and the redtail. The 3 predators instantly became a tangled mess of violence. The arawana's armor-like scales scraped the redtail, while the piranhas seized the chance to bite the arawana's back. Stung by the pain, the redtail thrashed its tail wildly, striking a passing tiger fish. Chaos began to spread through the tank like a plague, fueled by the scent of blood. The nerves of every fish were on edge. These starving predators had completely lost their minds. Other fish began to circle the battlefield in a restless frenzy. Even the massive arapaima drifted closer, its enormous frame looming like an ancient titan as it kept a watchful eye on the escalating war. Meanwhile, our carp hid in a crevice of the driftwood, watching the melee he had orchestrated with a cold, detached gaze. His plan was working perfectly. If there was no food, he would simply let these predators fight it out. As long as one was injured, the resulting scraps would be his hope for survival. Right then, the alligator-snapping turtle was drawn in by the scent of blood, crawling slowly from the bottom. It looked clumsy, but it moved with sudden, violent speed. With one snap, it clamped onto the redtail's tail. Seeing his chance, our carp immediately swam behind the old turtle. When this brute tears at its prey, it always drops scraps of meat. The silver arowana, its eye bitten by a piranha, had gone completely ballistic. It began thrashing wildly against the rockery and driftwood, causing the entire tank to shudder. Perfect. A golden glint flashed in our carp's eyes. As the melee continued, the scene inside the tank grew increasingly gruesome. That prized $8,000 arowana had lost a third of its silver scales, and the redtail's beautiful fins were shredded. He swam to the glass, watching the drifting scales and streaks of blood with a surge of dark satisfaction. This was exactly the show he wanted. At 6:30 the next morning, Marcus pushed open the studio door, sporting a pair of heavy dark circles under his eyes. He had been drinking at a bar until 3 a.m., and his temples were still throbbing painfully. He muttered to himself that the worthless carp must be finished by now. If it hadn't starved to death, his precious pets surely would have eaten it. Marcus headed straight for the large tank. Let's see where that pathetic carp is, he grumbled while rubbing his head. Suddenly, his breakfast bag hit the floor with a heavy thud. Hot soy milk splashed onto his pants, but he didn't even notice the heat. The sight inside the tank hit him like a sledgehammer to the skull. His $8,000 silver arowana was drifting at the bottom like a tattered rag. It struggled to move, its scales mostly gone to reveal raw, pink muscle. The $3,500 redtail was curled in a corner, its iconic vibrant red tail reduced to a few lonely, jagged bone spines. 6 African tiger fish, worth nearly $500 each, were floating belly up on the surface. One had even been bitten clean in half. The sheer brutality of the scene made Marcus's head spin. He felt as though he'd been struck. He lunged toward the glass, his lips trembling as he frantically scanned the tank. At least, he told himself, his most valuable. The snake was harmless, otherwise Marcus might have fainted on the spot. Even so, his throat tightened as he struggled to swallow. His legs suddenly gave out, and he collapsed onto his knees before the tank with a heavy thud. His fingers clawed at the glass, and his voice carried in unnatural tremor as he gasped, "My fish, my fish." Our carp, having heard the commotion, was leisurely hiding behind the massive arapaima. Through the murky, blood-stained water, he watched the entire progression of Marcus's expression, from blank confusion to shock, and finally to a twisted mask of agony. Marcus's arrogant face was now as pale as paper, his temples throbbing as his mouth twitched uncontrollably. Our carp felt a sudden surge of pure delight. After all, the answer he'd risked his life to prepare for this man all night had finally been delivered. And to be honest, this was only the beginning. He deliberately swam over to the carcass of a piranha, pretending to nibble on it while leaving half his body exposed. His round, glassy eyes remained fixed on Marcus, carefully adjusting his angle to ensure the man saw just how lively he was. As his silhouette drifted slowly across Marcus's field of vision, the man's gaze locked onto him with terrifying intensity. Seeing the carp's casual movements, Marcus's breathing grew heavy and ragged as he stumbled to his feet. He gripped the edge of the tank so hard his knuckles turned white. "You," he hissed, the word squeezed through gritted teeth. "It has to be you." He called the fish a cursed thing before spinning around toward his workbench, frantically fumbling to turn on his live streaming equipment. The moment the camera flickered to life, the chat exploded with questions. Viewers asked what happened to the arowana and where the piranhas went. They were all demanding to see the Blade Master. As if responding to the fans, our carp swam gracefully from behind the driftwood. The scar on his head gleamed under the aquarium lights, his scales looking even more lustrous than yesterday. He even performed a beautiful flick of his tail right in front of the lens. It was the ultimate revenge of the scarred carp, the star of the show. Marcus stared at the screen, his left hand trembling uncontrollably as he wondered where his massive collection of expensive fish had gone. He tried to breathe, but seeing the comments made him lose it. Fans laughed that his face had turned green and suggested he switched to raising carp, since the Blade Master clearly enjoyed watching Marcus suffer. "What do you people know?" Marcus suddenly barked, slamming his fist onto the table with a voice cracking into a sob. He asked if they knew how much these fish cost. The arowana flown in from Malaysia, the redtail he'd raised for 2 years. It was all gone. Everything. His expression shifted from rage to pure agony as he buried his hands in his hair, losing his mind. Naturally, the chat only became more festive. They told the host not to get so worked up over a single fish. But this was the Blade Master we were talking about. Marcus's breathing became more rapid as he turned to rummage frantically through his tool cabinet. His hand stopped when it hit a metal object, and a twisted, complex smile spread across his face. It was a heavy-duty net designed for handling massive fish. "Watch closely, brothers," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. "Today, I'll show you exactly how a professional handles a problem." His hands trembling, Marcus raised the heavy net and aimed it at the water. The chat exploded instantly, with viewers begging the host not to do anything reckless while warning our carp to run. Having sensed the danger from the shift in Marcus's expression long ago, our carp flicked his tail and darted nimbly behind the massive arapaima. Marcus's aim followed him, but he hesitated. He didn't dare lower the net, fearing he might accidentally injure the arapaima, which was worth tens of thousands of dollars. "Come out, get out of there," Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. Hysterically, he began banging the handle of the net against the glass, his shouts now carrying the sound of a man on the verge of tears. Just then, his phone began to vibrate violently. The platform moderator had sent 3 consecutive messages. His live stream had been flagged for inappropriate behavior, and the system had detected a massive wave of viewer complaints. The final message was the straw that broke the camel's back. The channel was banned for 24 hours. Marcus completely collapsed, his spirit finally breaking under the weight of it all. He slumped to the floor, staring with hollow eyes at the devastated aquarium. He began to mutter the costs like a mantra. $8,000 for the silver arowana, $3,500 for the redtail, $1,200 for the piranhas. Meanwhile, the chat reached a fever pitch of mockery, laughing at the spectacular sight of a professional breakdown. To be honest, it was quite the performance. They suggested he change his username to the host bullied by a carp, calling it the highlight of their day. As the insults flew across the screen, the feed suddenly cut to black. With the stream closed, Marcus sat on the floor for a long time, his breathing heavy and ragged. Eventually, he forced himself up and walked back to the tank to face the carnage. He stared at the floating carcasses in silence. His fingertips hovered over the water's surface for 3 full seconds, as if he were afraid of what he might find if he touched it. When his fingers finally brushed the cold body of the silver arowana, his eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. Gritting his teeth, he carefully used the net to scoop up the remains. He found it strange. His fish had never fought like this before. He couldn't understand why they had suddenly turned so violent over the last 2 days. It made no sense whatsoever. He leaned in close to inspect the wounds, his nose nearly touching the decaying flesh. The stench of rot hit him instantly, yet he remained frozen, staring at the bite marks in confusion. After several seconds, he straightened his back and slammed the dead fish into a freezer box. He began to mechanically repeat the process, fishing out one carcass after another. Once the dead were cleared, he turned a cold, piercing gaze toward our carp. "Fine, you think you're pretty capable, don't you?" Marcus let out a sudden, chilling laugh. He tapped the net sharply against the glass, vowing to play this game to the very end. 2 hours later, we find Marcus slumped at his office desk, exhausted but brooding. He was trying to process the sheer absurdity of the situation. Deep down, he knew this carp was unlike anything he had ever encountered in his 10 years of handling predatory fish. How could he let a mere carp break his spirit? If word got out that he'd been outsmarted by a common fish, his reputation would be ruined forever. He couldn't allow that to happen. Marcus's eyes suddenly filled with a fierce, desperate light. He slammed his fist onto the desk, his mind already churning with a new, much darker plan to reclaim his pride. Marcus suddenly stood up, his mind racing with a desperate, frantic energy. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. Jacob, do you still have those red-bellied piranhas in your shop? I need adults, at least 10 of them. And those black ghost knife fish, are they still available? Good, I'll take them all. Just send everything you have over to me immediately. He hung up the phone, his eyes fixed on the tank with a look that suggested he was finally ready to go to war. Our carp observed the room for a long time, only daring to swim out once he was sure Marcus had truly left. After such a provocation, it was no wonder the man had snapped. He would surely return with more schemes, but our carp wasn't afraid. Marcus had started this by trying to use him as fodder. As he pondered this, he remembered his daily reward. He called upon the system to claim his prize for surviving another day. A chime echoed in his mind, announcing that the random draw for today's survival reward was now beginning. Congratulations, the system announced. You have gained a 2% increase in auditory sensitivity. The moment the words faded, a flood of chaotic sounds rushed into his consciousness. The swirling currents, the hum of the filter, and even muffled noises from outside the glass became crystal clear. He was overjoyed, as this was exactly what he needed most right now. With such sharp hearing, he could eavesdrop on the host's plans next time he approached. Combined with his enhanced sense of smell, his chances of survival were growing exponentially. These were the tools he needed to stay alive in this glass prison. Another night passed, and we see our carp slowly waving his tail just to maintain his balance in the water. It had been 48 hours since his last proper meal, and his stomach was beginning to burn with a searing pain. To be honest, the hunger was becoming harder to ignore than the predators. While he had successfully goaded the larger fish into killing each other, he never had the chance to actually eat. Those beasts became so frenzied at the scent of blood that joining them was suicide. A system warning flashed. His stomach lining was beginning to self-digest. Marcus still hadn't provided any food today, clearly hoping to starve our carp into submission. His eyes darted around the tank. If the host wanted to play hardball, then he would just have to make Marcus feel the sting in his wallet again. He began to swim out slowly. His lateral line suddenly captured an unusual vibration nearby. Two golden datnoids were currently locked in a fierce territorial dispute over a quiet corner of the tank. These South American predators were notoriously ill-tempered, and right now, their massive foreheads were colliding with a sound of grinding scales that would make anyone's teeth ache. Our carp watched them, noticing that the larger of the two had a visible wound on its eye from last night's chaos. In that moment, a new plan began to take shape in his mind. He decided it was time to intervene. He first swam toward 3 Goliath tigerfish, African predators that were currently suspended in the water with a deceptive, lazy stillness. He knew their strike speed could reach several body lengths per second, an explosive power comparable to a human Olympic sprinter. They were the perfect tools for his next move. When he was only 20 centimeters away from the nearest tigerfish, he suddenly thrashed his body with violent intensity. This sudden movement stirred the water into a frantic swirl. A dense trail of bubbles erupted, instantly alerting the 3 predators. They snapped into an attack stance, but our carp had already darted behind a passing giant fish. This cover allowed him to perfectly hide his silhouette, providing just enough of a window for his next move. Like an arrow from a bow, he charged toward the injured golden datnoid. At the very moment of impact, he swerved sharply, his tail slamming hard against the predator's wounded left eye. The ambushed datnoid let out a metaphorical scream of pain. Driven by a sudden and violent rage, it lashed out blindly, and the other golden datnoid joined the fray. 3 massive predators, each nearly 40 centimeters long, began a brutal struggle within the narrow confines of the tank. Scales and slime clouded the water, while the metallic scent of blood spread like an invisible net through every corner. Our carp simply drifted back, watching the chaos unfold. He moved slowly, his tail fin swaying gently just to maintain his balance. Under his careful guidance, the battle between the golden datnoids and the tigerfish continued to escalate. Broken scales drifted through the water like falling leaves, while red streaks of blood expanded into an abstract painting. To be honest, it was a masterpiece of carnage. He narrowed his eyes, possessed by a single thought. The chaos had to intensify. While today's brawl was fierce, for a host like Marcus, the stakes weren't high enough yet. The losses were still too small. Only the minor fish were dying. Even the silver arowana, though heavily injured, was still clinging to a desperate breath of life. For the past few days, Marcus had surprisingly stopped his active torment, but he also hadn't provided a single scrap of food. Late that night, our carp hid in the shadows. His golden pupils contracted slightly. 7 days of struggling between life and death had made his scales incredibly sensitive, allowing him to feel the slightest change in water temperature. The system began today's survival reward draw. He had gained hydrodynamic perception, basic. A sharp, electric sting shot through his nerves as the new power took hold. In an instant, he could see the distribution of every current in the tank. He felt the vortexes created by the arapaima and the sudden pressure shifts from the piranhas. He could even sense the minute vibrations caused by the snapping turtle crawling across the bottom. Everything formed a crystal-clear map within his mind. He gently flicked his tail fin, testing the limits of this new ability. It was as if the water itself was now telling him its secrets, one vibration at a time. Even from 20 centimeters away, The system interface flickered. Host, Ryan. Species, carp. Constitution, 30. Strength, 15, weak. Agility, 20, weak. Talents, death struggle, hydrodynamic perception, enhanced smell, enhanced hearing. His attributes had grown significantly over the week. He had grown much stronger, yet compared to the monsters in this tank, he was still far behind. If not for his wits, he wouldn't have survived this long. As he flicked his tail, hunger clawed at his stomach like a hook. 3 meters to his right, 3 golden datnoids were on patrol, and we see that the largest one still bore a wound on its left eye from when our carp lured it into a rock. A trail of bubbles drifted from his mouth as he focused on something below. He had spotted a bloody fin stuck under the driftwood, a remnant from the previous battle. To reach it, he would have to cross a dangerous territory. He needed to bypass 2 platinum tigerfish. He began the standard process: observe, predict, and calculate. When all the factors aligned in his mind, he finally moved. Like a bolt of golden lightning, he darted forward and snatched the scrap of food before the first platinum tigerfish could even react. It was a perfect strike. However, as he turned, his tail accidentally brushed the driftwood. The tiny vibration was enough to alert a tiger shovel-nosed catfish resting behind the rocks. The massive predator opened its cavernous mouth, its 6 barbels locking onto him like radar. Worse still, the scent of blood had drawn the 3 golden datnoids. His scales bristled instantly, but fear only made his mind sharper. To be honest, he seemed to thrive under the pressure of being hunted from all sides. He intentionally charged at the most aggressive datnoid, diving sharply at the last second. The resulting splash from the predator's sudden turn momentarily clouded their vision. Taking his chance, he slipped into the shadows of some artificial weeds, letting his color dim. As the massive shovel-nosed catfish glided directly over him, he could feel the icy touch of those barbels brushing past. After 3 minutes of life-or-death maneuvering, he finally made it back to the Arapima's territory. He chewed his meager meal carefully, noticing new marks on the tank floor. There were strange scales there, shimmering with an eerie blue-green luster. A newcomer. He expanded his hydrodynamic perception to its limit, searching the water. A faint blue light flickered briefly exactly where he had been just moments ago. Through the murky water, he caught a glimpse of a slender, translucent silhouette. It was a ghost knife fish, but one with a terrifying secret. Its spine flickered with visible electricity. His pupils contracted. He realized Marcus must have added this new predator while he was resting, which was quite a nasty surprise. Even a carp needs to sleep, after all. Disguising himself as a piece of floating wood, he drifted with the current to observe this new, mutated threat. He discovered that the knife fish's attacks followed a pattern. After each electrical discharge, it needed roughly 2 minutes to recover. A vital piece of information. He noted this weakness, also spotting a fresh wound on the predator's belly. As moonlight filtered through the curtains, he began his nightly patrol of the tank. He swam along the glass walls searching for scraps, but Marcus seemed determined to starve them out. He would have to find a new source of food. His gaze fell upon the algae clinging to the tank walls. He took a small bite, and though the bitter taste made him want to gag, it did soothe the burning sensation in his stomach. As the night deepened, we see him discover an interesting phenomenon. The mutated knife fish seemed particularly wary of the giant Arapima. This discovery allowed him to immediately adjust his survival strategy. If that knife fish began its electrical sweep, staying close to the Arapima would be the safest choice. When the first rays of morning light filtered into the tank, a new shallow scar appeared on his tail fin. It was a souvenir from testing the knife fish's attack range, but it was well worth it. Now he knew the creature's maximum discharge distance was exactly 3 meters, and it couldn't attack continuously. He gently brushed against the Arapima's belly scales, feeling the only rhythm of life in these waters. Staying alive was difficult, but with every passing day, he grew a little stronger and smarter. Another day passed, but his mood grew increasingly heavy. He was certain that the ghost knife fish was a professional assassin sent by Marcus specifically to deal with him. That fish was exceptionally clever. Knowing it couldn't defeat the larger predators, its target was locked onto him from the start. His scales twitched slightly, capturing the faintest changes in the water's electrical current. The system's warning was grim. Danger level high. Host survival rate dropped to 41%. The alerts constantly stimulated his nerves. This time, things wouldn't be so easy. He slowly sank to the bottom, pressing his belly against the sand filled with waste and decaying meat. This foul stench was perfect for masking his own scent. He noticed the knife fish's attack had a fatal flaw. Before every discharge, its spine would flicker blue 3 times, like a finger tightening on a trigger. 2 meters to his right, a scavenger fish was munching on algae. He watched as the knife fish approached silently, its spine flickering blue. With a sharp crackle, a blinding blue light struck, and the scavenger instantly went rigid, floating upward with its belly exposed. But what truly alarmed him was that the giants who usually ignored him were suddenly full of hostility. He backed away slowly, smelling a strange chemical scent in the water that irritated his gills. The water quality test detected traces of anesthetic. That man was drugging the water. His scales bristled instantly. This explained why the Arapima was acting out, and it meant Marcus wanted to dull the fish's senses so the Electric Killer could win more easily. He quickly swam behind a decorative shop hidden by artificial weeds, and through a hole, he saw the entire tank undergoing a terrifying change. The piranhas were staggering, the tigerfish slowed down, and even the snapping turtle's movements became soft and sluggish. The only creature seemingly unaffected by the drugs was that ghost knife fish. Marcus was a madman, he thought, but perhaps this chaos was actually tailor-made for his escape. He forced himself into a semi-dormant state, slowing his heart and breathing to resist the anesthetic's effects. Suddenly, crackle! The harsh sound of an electrical current echoed from the right side of the tank. Peering from a coral crevice, he flicked his tail to send a withered leaf drifting toward the heater. Under the influence of the drugs, the knife fish's judgment had clearly faltered. With a flash of blue light, the predator lunged at the drifting weed, striking the glass heating rod with precision. A muffled bang followed as the heater's fuse blew instantly, sending a back current that left the ghost knife fish twitching and floating belly up. Its spinal light flickered wildly, indicating a severe injury. He didn't waste this golden opportunity, despite his intense dizziness. He swam toward the most hidden corner, a hollow ceramic jar he'd found days ago. But just as he reached it, a violent vibration shook the water. The giant arapaima had drifted directly above him, its massive body completely blocking his path. Those cold, predator eyes shimmered with a sudden hunger. He froze in place, pleading silently for the giant to pick a better time for a snack. With a behemoth in front and a recovering assassin behind, he was trapped. In that life-or-death moment, he noticed a frayed wire near the ceramic jar. The insulation was gone, and the copper wire trembled in the water. A daring, perhaps even insane, idea flashed through his mind. Using his last bit of strength, he flicked the wire toward the still-twitching knife fish. The moment the copper touched the predator's spine, crack! A blinding blue explosion erupted as a massive current surged through the tank. The arapaima thrashed in pain and fled, while that exposed wire acted like a lightning rod, grounding most of the surge into the metal frame. When the water finally stilled, the knife fish had sunk to the bottom, its light fading. He seized the chance to slip into the ceramic jar, his scales trembling. Suddenly, the system chimed, "Host. Physical limits reached," triggering a hidden mutation. The electrical resistance talent was now active. In the darkness, he felt a sense of silent triumph. His scales felt numb as the residual current danced over his body like tiny needles. Through a crack in the jar, he saw the ghost knife fish drifting aimlessly, its blue light dimming. The resistance integration was underway, currently sitting at 23%. The new talent was reshaping his body, making him more sensitive to electricity, yet far more resistant to it. And then, the studio door creaked open. Marcus appeared before the tank, dark circles under his eyes, and his face turned a sickly shade of green when he saw the floating knife fish and the charred heater. "How did this happen?" His voice echoed through the water, his mouth twitching uncontrollably. Our protagonist retreated deeper into the ceramic jar, knowing it wasn't yet the right time to be discovered. Then, we hear a sharp sizzle. The dull vibrations of Marcus banging on the glass startled the giant arapaima. In a reflexive flick of its tail, the massive fish sent a surge of water, pushing the heater's wreckage right back toward the ghost knife fish. Instinctively, the predator discharged its own current, crack, causing a second short circuit. This reflected current left the knife fish completely paralyzed, sinking like a tattered rag. To his surprise, when the residual current swept over him, the stinging pain was noticeably weaker. His electrical resistance integration reached 51%. He carefully swam out of his hiding spot, noticing the tank's ecosystem had already shifted entirely. The once ferocious predators were now huddled in corners. Seizing the opportunity, he slowly swam toward the back of the filter. A large amount of food residue had accumulated there. On the way, he deliberately slowed down near the knife fish to test his newfound resistance. A faint blue light flickered, but the expected agony never came. Instead, it felt like a coarse, numbing breeze. A system warning flashed. Excessive contact is life-threatening. He snapped back to his senses and swam to the filter to gorge himself. The feeling of fullness brought a clarity he had never known. He looked at the half-dead knife fish with a dangerous glint in his eyes. The wound on its belly was already infected and turning white. It wouldn't last 3 days. Perhaps he could put this waste to good use. He stirred the water, pushing the knife fish toward the broken wire, and then he accelerated suddenly, slamming his head hard into its spine. One last burst of current erupted, and the ghost knife fish finally stopped breathing. The corpse was now perfectly wedged between the heater wires. Next came the final step of his plan. He bit the knife fish's tail and dragged it toward the arapaima's territory. The faint current still lingering in the corpse would keep the giant at bay, while the route he chose was a perfect blind spot in the current. He was playing a clever game of framing. The biggest threat in this tank was that massive arapaima. He placed the corpse right at the giant's doorstep and retreated. Now, he only had to wait for Marcus to return and see that his prized arapaima had seemingly killed the expensive knife fish. He hid back in the jar, digesting his hard-earned gains while waiting for the fallout. His hunger had finally eased, but the water's surface suddenly surged with violent ripples. He peered cautiously from a gap in the rocks as Marcus pushed the door open, looking far too excited. "I'm going to show you something special today," he shouted, his voice shriller than usual. We see him setting up 3 cameras, his face flushed with a sickly, manic glow. At his feet sat a cooler covered in danger labels. The livestream viewers were already panicking, sensing something big was coming. He stared warily at the box as Marcus began to lift. The lid just a crack, and he immediately felt a surge of abnormal electricity. 3 purebred Amazon black demon fish. Marcus roared. They cost me 30,000, and every single one is trained to kill a specific target. He opened the box to reveal 3 pitch black, monstrous fish with serrated spines swimming inside. Their backs flickered with blue and purple sparks, a truly terrifying sight, to be honest. The chat exploded as they realized Marcus had spent a fortune just to hunt a single carp. He reached for a special insulated net and scooped out the first predator. The moment it left the water, it thrashed violently, the air crackling with visible sparks. 600 volts of high-voltage power. Marcus's face twisted with a cruel delight. And they are trained to hunt only that one fish. He released the first black demon fish into the tank. Our protagonist watched as the predator hit the water, its eyes locking onto him. The hunt had officially begun. The black fish darted through the water with unnatural speed, its electrical aura rippling through the tank. He realized then that Marcus wasn't just trying to kill him. He was turning his survival into a gruesome public spectacle. Deep down, he knew his previous resistance training would be put to the ultimate test. This wasn't just a fight, it was an execution. But as we've seen before, our little carp is anything but ordinary. He didn't flee in a panic. He began to calculate. The first black demon fish lunged, a bolt of blue light trailing behind it. He dodged by a hair's breadth, feeling the water sizzle. Marcus laughed, urging the other 2 fish into the tank to join the chase. The odds were now 3 against 1, hardly a fair fight. Yet, in this moment of extreme danger, he felt a strange sense of calm. The system's warnings were flashing, but his mind was clear. He led the predators toward the back of the tank, near the filter where he had previously sabotaged the wiring. If Marcus wanted a show, he was going to get one. It was time to see if these expensive predators could handle their own medicine. Then, the piranhas, red-tailed catfish, and arapaima swarmed forward, tearing those black demon fish apart on the spot. Even the snapping turtle in the corner poked its head out to join the feeding frenzy. Suddenly, a massive wave surged in the tank as the giant arapaima's body descended like a titan. Hardly anyone could track its movement. We only see a dark current surge as half of a black demon fish's carcass simply vanishes. When the last predator floated to the surface belly up, the livestream chat erupted in total chaos. Marcus, however, slumped to the floor, staring blankly at his devastated aquarium. His beloved silver arowana had half its face torn away, and the red-tailed catfish was shivering in a corner. If he had known this would be the result, he never would have introduced those monsters. These fish were his pride and joy, and now, Marcus's heart was bleeding. The metallic scent of blood still lingered in the tank. Our carp suspended himself quietly near the filter outlet, feeling the soothing flow of the water. His enhanced hearing captured every sound in the studio. Marcus's heavy breathing, the vibration of a phone, and the hum of the air conditioner. The chat was still scrolling wildly. My god, the Blade Master actually finished off the demon fish. This isn't a gift, it's a god of war. Marcus's face is literally green, huh? Marcus sat there like a wooden statue, his gaze shifting from the dead fish to the wounded ones, finally fixing on our protagonist. His lips trembled, but he couldn't find a single word to say. Suddenly, he reached out and cut the livestream, plunging the studio into a dead silence. He watched Marcus's every move with extreme caution. The man stood up slowly, his steps unsteady as he walked to the cabinet and grabbed a tin of premium koi feed he had never used before. You must be hungry too, he whispered, his voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. He shakily tore open the seal, but stopped abruptly right in front of the glass. This sudden movement made our carp instinctively retreat. His fins flared in a defensive posture. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Marcus pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned, his eyes suddenly turning red. He knelt down slowly and gently sprinkled the feed far away from the other fish. We noticed that this once arrogant and overbearing streamer was now moving with the gentle care of a complete novice. What on earth? A change of heart? His suspicion was at an all-time high, his body tense, but the aroma of that top-tier feed was truly enticing. He swam over cautiously, keeping enough distance to retreat at a moment's notice. Marcus simply sat there quietly on his knees, watching. When the carp darted away at a small noise, Marcus's shoulders visibly slumped. Eat, just eat, he sighed. Blade Master, right? I give up. This admission allowed our friend to relax just a little as he hid behind some driftwood. Peering through a gap, he watched the streamer, who now seemed like a complete stranger as he began tenderly treating the silver arawana's wounds. His movements were as gentle as if he were tending to a newborn. As dusk fell, he didn't start a stream, but instead pulled up a chair and sat before the tank. He opened his phone to watch recordings of his previous live streams. On the screen, he saw his own face, twisted in a sneer, shouting about how he would kill that carp. Suddenly, he turned off the video and laughed at himself with bitter irony. His shoulders trembled slightly, and we see the glint of moisture between his fingers. It was a shocking sight. This once arrogant man was actually weeping in front of a fish tank. Late at night, he finally stood and gently tapped the glass. It wasn't the usual aggressive pounding, but 3 soft taps, like knocking on a friend's door. Good night, see you tomorrow. Only after the door closed did our carp truly relax. He swam slowly to the surface, nibbling on the remaining feed. What was this? A reconciliation? To be honest, he didn't quite know how to react to this change. From the moment he was tossed into this tank, he hadn't known a single day of peace. Being treated like this now made all his previous life and death struggles feel strange. He blew out a string of bubbles and decided not to overthink it. After all, staying alive is a win. This was the first time since arriving here that he could actually rest with a peaceful mind. In a daze, he felt as if he had returned to his previous life, back when he wasn't a fish at all. The faint click of the door opening startled him awake. At the crack of dawn, Marcus tiptoed back in, sporting heavy dark circles under his eyes, but carrying 2 brand new pieces of aquarium equipment. Good morning, he said, his voice raspy but surprisingly gentle. He began carefully installing a new UV sterilizer, moving with extreme caution so as not to disturb the water. Water quality improving. Harmful bacteria reduced by 40%, the system's voice chimed in. The notification prompted him to swim toward the glass. Seeing this, Marcus immediately stopped his work and pulled a sealed bag of fresh corn kernels from his pocket. You must be starving after these past few days, Blade Master, he whispered, slowly sprinkling the corn into the water. You should like these much better. The sweet aroma immediately stimulated the carp's senses. He was hungry, but he noticed Marcus immediately took 2 steps back and even held his breath. Well, there was no point in being polite when food was involved. He began sucking in the corn kernels one by one. To be fair, the texture was far superior to raw meat. Watching him eat, Marcus finally let out a sigh of relief, his lips curling into an unconscious smile. As the sun rose, Marcus finally turned on the camera. The man on screen looked like a completely different person. His hair was neat, and he wore a clean shirt. Good morning, everyone, he greeted the viewers. Today, we aren't doing any of those flashy stunts. The chat erupted instantly. My God, has Marcus been possessed? This gentle tone is actually terrifying. Is the Blade Master okay? Let us see him. Marcus ignored the frantic comments and explained softly. I did a lot of thinking yesterday. Keeping fish. It shouldn't be like this, Marcus said, pointing toward the injured silver arowana. We see the regret in his eyes as he realizes how much he's tormented them. I understand now, and I'm humbled, he continued. Surviving in my tank is a testament to this carp's own strength. From today on, I won't interfere anymore. How long he lives is entirely up to him. The chat went silent for a few seconds before exploding with emotion. It seems our host has finally grown up. This was the fish-keeping creator they had originally followed. As our carp's silhouette swam past the lens, a genuine smile tugged at the corners of Marcus's mouth. Blade Master, I'm truly impressed. Hearing this title caused the chat to erupt once more, while our carp felt a strange mix of complicated emotions. Hatred and resentment lingered, but in a world where the strong eat the weak, everyone was simply playing their part. He flicked his tail dismissively. He swam slowly to the front of the glass, locking eyes with the camera. The viewers were awestruck by the luster of his scales, showering the room with gifts. That afternoon, Marcus did something that shocked everyone. He began dismantling every single high-tension trap and device inside the tank. From now on, he announced solemnly to the lens, this tank will only have a natural ecosystem. As for the Blade Master, I will no longer interfere. If he can live for decades, I will care for him for decades. As he tossed the last electronic trap into the trash, the chat was filled with cheers for his transformation. When night fell, Marcus spent an extra hour by the tank, giving every fish a formal name. It was a quiet, almost domestic scene. He looked at our protagonist and chuckled. You'll stay as the Blade Master. After all, that is the title the internet has bestowed upon you. It was a sign of respect, in its own strange way. Daily survival reward. Muscle explosiveness plus 3%. The moment the system notification flashed, he lunged deep into a rocky crevice for cover. That 3% boost was tiny, but it was exactly what he needed to save his life as the massive shadows of the predators swept overhead. Having temporarily evaded the hunters, he swam toward a safe zone, his gills pumping rapidly. Even with his hiding spots, every meal felt like a dance with death. Marcus might have stopped his personal vendetta, but this was still an Amazon-themed tank filled with top-tier predators. A dangerous neighborhood, to say the least. The lack of human interference actually meant the return of raw, primal survival instincts. He was still small, and being targeted meant constant mortal danger. Suddenly, the water rippled as Marcus began feeding corn kernels. He purposefully scattered them far away from the usual predator gathering spots. He waited until the other fish were distracted before cautiously approaching to swallow 3 kernels, then immediately retreated back into the safety of the rocks. In this area, staying even a second too long could be fatal. We see the system's warning about protein deficiency flash as he eyes the space behind the filter. Shrimp scraps have piled up there, but 3 platinum gars are currently on patrol. His window of opportunity is a mere 2.3 seconds. Suddenly, Old Bone slaps the water with his tail, startling the gars. Our carp doesn't waste the opening his friend created and darts forward like an arrow. He snatches the largest piece of shrimp and retreats instantly. The entire process took less than 1.5 seconds. However, he's caught the eye of the Florida snapping turtle. This old hunter, his shell covered in algae, slowly turns as his cloudy eyes lock onto our protagonist. He immediately executes his emergency plan, swimming in irregular patterns around the heater. The turtle has incredible linear speed, but turning is his fatal flaw. After 3 sharp turns, the turtle slams heavily into the glass, while our carp has already returned to Old Bone's protective circle. As night falls, the danger multiplies. The nocturnal electric eels begin to stir. He floats quietly in the shadow of Old Bone's belly, his scales twitching as they absorb trace amounts of electricity for training. At dawn, a sudden commotion breaks out. A school of piranhas rushes madly toward the steel intake, tearing at a piece of decaying fin. The fin gives off a strange, sickly sweet scent, likely some fish medication Marcus dropped while cleaning the filter yesterday. Some kind of stimulant is spreading rapidly through the water. He grits his teeth in frustration. His luck really couldn't be worse. Suddenly, Old Bone rears his head. His silver scales flare out, a signal of extreme danger. Our carp instinctively rushes toward his pre-selected refuge between the heater and the glass. The impact of a red-tailed catfish makes the entire tank shudder. The frenzied piranhas begin attacking indiscriminately, and a mist of blood fills the water. A sudden discharge from an electric eel interrupts the slaughter, but the shockwaves hit Old Bone too. The old giant rolls in pain, smashing the decorative coral. His shelter collapses instantly, and 3 crazed golden dorado come charging straight for him. To be honest, it felt like the universe was conspiring against him. There's no time to think. He swims toward the strongest current, using the electrical stimulation to reach terminal velocity as he aims for the filter intake. This narrow passage, less than 10 centimeters wide, is his only hope. The metal pipe scrapes against him painfully, but he doesn't have the luxury of caring. Through the gaps, we see the chaotic feast outside. The turtle bites the eel, Old Bone rams the dorado, and Marcus is frantically tapping on the glass. After what feels like an eternity, the chaos finally subsides. He cautiously swims out of the pipe to find the bodies of 2 piranhas floating nearby. The eel has been bitten in half, and a large chunk of Old Bone's tail fin is missing. The survivors have returned to a haunting, quiet stillness. In a scene of absolute madness, Marcus squats before the tank and scoops out the carcass of a platinum gar worth $4,000, his mouth twitching in frustration. He curses under his breath while tossing the dead fish into the trash, and as the live chat floods with condolences, he suddenly lets out a sharp laugh. He tells his viewers that, to be honest, he should have been used to this by now, before pulling 3 sealed bags from a cooler with a grin. Inside the bags are 3 creatures we've likely never seen before. First, an African blind eel, pitch black and eyeless, navigating solely by electromagnetic fields. Next is a 3-foot flame scorpionfish covered in venomous spines. And finally, a deep-sea glow squid that secretes hallucinogenic mucus. It seems our blade master is in trouble. The viewers wonder where Marcus found these monsters, and if he's targeting our carp, but he simply claims he's just restocking his predator tank, as promised. Since everyone wants to see a real show, Marcus rubs his hands together and drags out an even larger container from behind him. He wasn't joking. The true ace is hidden here. Inside this insulated box coils a creature that causes the entire chat to go silent. It has the body of a snake and the scales of a crocodile. This is the vampire goby, a nightmare of evolution that looks like a relic from a forgotten age. Marcus claims it only hunts prey under 30 centimeters and won't hurt his big prizes, a statement that makes our protagonist's heart race with pure dread. If our carp could speak, he would surely have some choice words for Marcus's entire family. Marcus narrows his eyes, noticing the fish's sudden agitation. It seems Blade Master recognizes a natural predator when he sees one. As the vampire goby enters the water, the other fish recoil in instinctive terror. It floats like a piece of driftwood, motionless except for its crimson eyes which scan the tank before finally locking onto our protagonist. A system warning screams in his mind. SSS rank lethal species detected. PMD speed survival rate calculated at a dismal 19%. Before Marcus can even finish his sentence, the vampire goby lunges with impossible speed, biting clean through the blind eel in the isolation zone. The live stream goes dead silent as the eel's jaw unhinges, revealing 7 rows of hooked, razor-sharp teeth that sink deep into the prey's gills. In a mere 10 seconds, the vibrant fish is reduced to a shriveled husk. Marcus is so stunned that his notebook slips from his hand and hits the floor. The vampire goby releases its prize, the carnage leaving a grim stain on the water's clarity. It seems the hunt has only just begun, and the predator looks as though it's savoring the anticipation. Marcus forces a twisted smile for the camera, telling his fans not to worry, because if there's one thing he has plenty of, it's more fish to throw into the fray. Marcus roars at the camera, promising to show us a true Amazonian apex predator, before turning away as the heavy thud of footsteps approaches. A little later, Marcus and several strong men haul a massive tank into view, slamming it onto the floor with a heavy, ridiculous thud. The moment he flips the lid open, our protagonist's scales stand on end. Inside are 3 dark brown monsters shaped like living torpedoes. Their backs are covered in jagged, stone-like bone plates, but what truly makes one's skin crawl are their completely transparent eyeballs. They look like glass pillars embedded in their heads, devoid of emotion. Marcus calls them giant hatchetfish, though locals call them the meat cleavers. He lifts one with tweezers, and the creature snaps its jaws open, exposing 4 fangs over 3 centimeters long to the open air. We can even see the faint glint of light on the tips of those teeth. The live chat explodes, fearing our Blade Master is about to become a kebab. But our carp isn't reading the comments. Marcus's words feel like ice picks stabbing into his brain, leaving him with only one thought. It's clear this man simply wants him dead. A system analysis identifies them as giant hatchetfish, specialized in high-speed piercing and tearing strikes. Their specialty is targeting the gills and underbelly of prey, and the system ranks them as an SS-rank threat, its alarms screaming in his mind. The sound is so sharp it feels like his consciousness might tear. Just then, the first hatchetfish is released into the water. It's as if someone hit the pause button on the entire tank. Every fish freezes, and even the snapping turtle retreats into its shell. The 16-inch killer hovers in the water, its transparent eyes rotating like eerie radar dishes scanning the battlefield. Marcus taps the glass, and the fish instantly becomes a black blur, its fangs screeching against the pane at a speed of 30 kilometers per hour. He calls it the Ferrari of freshwater fish. Then, a second, larger hatchetfish enters, its glass-bead eyes locking onto the wounded arapaima. For the first time, the massive arapaima shows a flicker of genuine dread, its enormous body beginning to slowly back away. Marcus excitedly adjusts the camera, telling his viewers to watch closely as he introduces the third one, a wild-caught giant over 20 inches long. His voice suddenly trails off. As the third killer enters the water, a sight unfolds that makes our protagonist's blood run cold. The 3 killers actually begin to coordinate, slowly circling our carp to form a perfect, inescapable perimeter. Their fins twitch rhythmically, as if communicating in some silent code. It seems our Blade Master is now facing a pack of 3 lone wolves. Our protagonist feels his blood run cold as the perimeter closes in. This was certainly not in the script, and the formation rate is climbing. With a 92% chance of death being calculated, he looks instinctively toward the arapaima, only to find the giant fish equally bewildered. The arapaima swims restlessly as the circle tightens. He notices the hatchetfish have taken up positions so precise that every escape route is blocked. They prepare to pounce. He summons an incredible burst of strength, narrowly slipping through a gap between the fangs of 2 attackers, but the third is already waiting. It charges like a cannonball, and with a sound like metal clashing, a searing pain rips through his side. The hatchetfish's fangs scrape across his scales, missing his vitals, but leaving 2 deep gashes on the unlucky fish behind him. Those teeth are as sharp as scalpels, but our Blade Master's scales are proving surprisingly tough as the hunt truly begins. He gasps for breath as the thin trails of blood from his wound instantly trigger the 3 monsters, their eyes turning a frantic, bloodshot red. The system detects a pheromone release and suggests he break their coordination immediately. He must disrupt their teamwork, but he isn't sure how. In this desperate moment, a flash of inspiration hits him. Even the smartest fish are driven by greed. He suddenly turns, not to flee, but to charge. He swims toward the lead fish and uses his tail to stir up the shrimp scraps settled at the bottom of the tank, sending them swirling into the water. The viewers think he's giving up and offering a final meal, but a second later, a scene unfolds that leaves everyone in the chat speechless. The 3 hatchetfish stop their pursuit, distracted by the shrimp. Torn between the kill and the food, they begin to snap and hiss at one another. The smallest one can't resist and bites its companion's back, causing Marcus to cry out in shock at the sudden betrayal. It seems our carp is a master of psychology, and he doesn't waste this precious opening, darting toward the turbulent water near the heater. However, the largest hatchetfish quickly regains its focus, transforming into a silver streak as it resumes the hunt with lethal intent. Its fangs aim straight for his eyes, and for a moment, it looks like the end, until a massive, silver-gray wall slams down in front of him. It's the arapaima, using its massive body to shield him from the fatal blow. The hatchetfish's fangs sink deep into its tail. The attacker's teeth are stuck fast in the thick scales, leaving our protagonist stunned by his ally's sacrifice. This is his chance. Using every ounce of his strength, he slams into the trapped hatchetfish, the terrifying force of the impact pinning the monster directly against the scalding heater. With a sickening sizzle, the creature struggles frantically. By the time it breaks free, it has lost its balance, falling right into the waiting jaws of the snapping turtle. The turtle bites down hard on its head, and seeing this, the remaining 2 hatchetfish actually stop their attack and retreat slowly toward the corner. For the first time, their eyes betray an emotion we might call pure terror. The battle is over, leaving Marcus stunned, along with the 4,000 viewers in the chat. Everyone is speechless. Deep down, our Blade Master feels a strange mix of emotions. He only intended to find a shield and use this idiot arapaima, but the giant actually treated him like a brother. Marcus squats in front of the tank, his finger tapping lightly on the glass as his gaze sweeps between our carp and the 2 shivering hatchetfish in the corner. Suddenly, he grins, a smile that feels colder than a hatchetfish's fangs. "My friends," he says, "I've just realized something." It seems Marcus is about to start another project, and the chat is already nervous. As they say, when Marcus smiles, life and death are up in the air. Marcus's tone suddenly becomes that of a mad scientist as he notes the body shape, the luster of the scales, and most importantly, the incredible survival genes. He suddenly slaps his thigh, declaring he'll find our Blade Master a wife to breed a new generation of supercarp, a plan that nearly makes our hero choke on his water. He can't believe his ears. His owner is actually trying to manage his love life. To be honest, he wonders if Marcus even has a girlfriend himself. Though he is a fish now, his soul is still human. The thought of a school of female carp is enough to make him plead for mercy. But Marcus is only half joking as he sets down the net he just used. A sudden wave splashes the camera right into the snapping turtle's face, filling the live stream with a giant close-up of the turtle's nostrils. The chat erupts in laughter at the turtle's lack of manners, while Marcus excitedly puts away his gear, already moving on to his next scheme. He opens a fish encyclopedia on his computer, his mouse finally hovering over a specific image, a German mirror carp, known for fewer scales and high disease resistance. The comments are flooded with protests against arranged marriages, insisting our Blade Master deserves free love, but Marcus is lost in his own fantasy. He imagines that if the pairing is successful, the fry will be born with combat experience. Meanwhile, he drags a dusty old tank out from the corner. Our protagonist feels a chill run from his tail to his head as Marcus decides on the mirror carp. "It's settled," Marcus says, much to the fish's dismay. Marcus slaps his thigh and grabs his phone to contact the seller, forcing our Blade Master to realize he must save himself, as relying on this impulsive owner is out of the question. He swims in two anxious circles, his gaze sweeping over the tank's equipment, the heater, the filter, the air pump, and the UV sterilizer, until a sudden spark of inspiration hits him. A brilliant idea flashes through his mind. Marcus cares about his livestream data more than anything, and if those numbers were to suddenly tank, he wouldn't have the heart to continue.